Hello, and welcome back to the weekly astrology podcast where we light our candles, grab our blankets, get cozy, and talk all things cosmos. I'm your host, Sarah Posh, astrologer and coach, and today's episode brings us to the depths of the depths of the depths, babe. The Scorpio New Moon. We're going to start with just a little overview, some of the highlights of the major aspects happening this week. We start with that Scorpio New Moon at 28 degrees of Scorpio on Wednesday, November 19th. And then as the week plays out, we're going to have the Mercury retrograde Cazimi, which marks that halfway point of the Mercury retrograde, and also Mercury's entrance back into those water trines with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. Right after that, Mercury is going to have a secret meetup with Venus in Scorpio, just in time for Venus to begin her entrance into the grand water trines and astrological kite with that opposition to Uranus and Taurus. And the final aspect that's playing out this week, that's kind of this behind the scenes, giving a context clue because it's actually implicated in all of the other transits unfolding throughout this week, is an outer planet sextile between Uranus and Taurus and Neptune and Pisces. And we're going to treat today's episode and pretty much this entire Scorpio lunar cycle similar to a murder mystery movie or a crime documentary. It's going to start with the flash of the end. It's going to show this scene of something that happened, some sort of outcome. And we're going to need to rewind. We need to go back, do some investigation, get into that process of discovery to maybe solve a mystery that might be connected to an old memory or an old feeling. I'm going to share some of my secret astrological significations that I see playing into this new moon. And that means the entire lunar cycle ahead. And we're going to talk about how you can work with this astrology, knowing that everything is a little bit hidden underground in the dark and the depths of the depths of the depths. So with that, let's dive into the deep end of this astrology in this week's episode, starting with that Scorpio new moon on Wednesday, November 19th. On Wednesday, November 19th, we get the exact Scorpio new moon at 10:47 p.m. Pacific time. This new moon that's beginning the next lunar cycle, it feels like not only are we in the depths of the depths of the depths of Scorpio season, the dark underwater of Mars' feminine domicile, we also see this new moon conjunct Mercury retrograde. That's right, Mercury is making its inferior Cazimi. It's marking its halfway point in its current retrograde cycle, conjunct this Scorpio new moon. In addition to that, there's also this hidden aspect between this new moon and Pluto in Aquarius. They're forming an antisha, which in traditional astrology is a hidden or secret conjunction between two planets in signs that share an equal shadow and light in relationship to the sun and the place of the solstices. So something that could easily be missed, something that is a little bit even more secretive or hidden, is the implications of what's being seeded at this Scorpio new moon. It's secretly connected to this major 20-year Pluto and Aquarius transit. There's a secret conversation, a secret coming together or underground negotiation between this Scorpio new moon, Mercury retrograde, and Pluto in Aquarius. The other hidden context clue that's implicated into the investigation, the process of discovery, or the mystery of the new beginnings being seeded during the Scorpio new moon is the outer planet transit between Uranus and Neptune. Right now, Uranus is back in Taurus and it's making an exact sextile to Neptune in Pisces at 29 degrees. This is even further emphasized because the planet Mercury is making an opposition to Uranus and Taurus, and then it's trine to Neptune in Pisces right before the Scorpio new moon and Mercury's retrograde conjunction. So if a Scorpio new moon wouldn't already be talking or pointing to something mysterious, maybe something hidden or yet to be revealed, all of these outer planet transits, the retrograde, and that secret antisha with Pluto and Aquarius, they're just further emphasizing and layering this quality of mystery, of consulting the mystery. And so some of the themes and key phrases I've been thinking about with this Scorpio new moon are things like initiating a process of discovery, or even the word disclosure. It's opening an investigation to something that was previously hidden or unknown. It could also be this idea of secret synapses, creating new connection points between different parts of our history, our memory, our feeling, and also the things that we're currently living, the dreams that we're starting to see maybe coming into the mirage of potentiality and fruition with these grand water trines. There's this magic, there's this mystery, there's a little bit of synchronicity, perhaps. And everything that's happening during this Scorpio new moon and this cycle ahead, it's begging us to slow down, to go more within, to activate a deeper listening, not only within ourselves and even with our feelings and self reflection processes, but also in the dream time. And what is our relationship to consulting the oracle? This Scorpio new moon conjunct Mercury retrograde. This is giving reading the tea leaf messages. This is giving having to be open to the moment where you have a deja vu, something that pauses you in your process. You're moving along your day, you're moving along your thought process, but somebody says something, or there's a lyric on a song. You open up an old book, but the page that's bookmarked, there's something underlined, and there's a secret message that's waiting for you to find it. This message is the connection point, a tether point to unraveling a mystery. Maybe it's a mystery of investigation that has to do with shadow work. So much that we've been talking about with these grand water trines and the potential of good that can come from this astrology. It has to do with removing the barriers within us. How do we expand our capacity to receive what wants to flow into our lives? The expansions that want to happen or the healing that wants to happen, it requires us to remove the barriers, the obstacles. And so this new moon and this lunar cycle, the way that we make the most of this astrology is anything that we feel inhibited, limited, frustrated, that's not happening in our external lives and environments, the outcomes that we're waiting to happen. And we're like, what walls do I need to tear down? Babe, the walls are inside. This is the best astrology to be doing inner work, to be doing any sort of shadow work, whether that's in a therapeutic or coaching container, even booking a consultation with a professional astrologer, anything to help us to hear, to open, to receive the messages of the oracle, of the unknown, of the internal underground unconscious, to reconnect these secret synapses. Part of my favorite work as an astrologer and a coach, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love to get into action. I love to get into strategy, into coming up with creative solutions or ideas for creating new things or starting new projects, new ventures. But the best, most rewarding part of the work is when we actually slow down and we name something hidden in the shadows that previously was unseen, it was unknown, but it was implicated in our ability to move forward or to create what it is that we are so inspired to create. These are those moments of awareness and also integration. So we stop having those unconscious internal conflicts, the battles in the parts of ourselves, the parts that are innocently trying to protect us. They learned some sort of coping or survival strategy that was necessary probably for some reason in our past in order to protect us. But until we really slow down and we feel a little bit more deeply, we reflect with a little bit more stillness and openness and curiosity, then we can start to see how these things are connected, how the things that are trying to protect us might actually be the very thing that's sabotaging our ability to go forward. So this lunar cycle, this is like the key fertile soil for this kind of work, for this kind of shadow work and integration and any kind of parts integration. A great book to recommend if you're interested in this kind of work. It's called No Bad Parts, and I'll go ahead and make sure I link that below for anybody interested. But getting back to this Scorpio new moon, what I want us to think about right now is, what is your relationship to the oracle? What is your relationship to your inner life? Coming back to that Uranus Neptune influence, the context clue implicated into the Scorpio new moon, I want us to remember that these outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, they don't operate in a Saturn way. Uranus and Neptune, they operate on synchronicity. They operate on serendipity, on a random intuitive impulse, a non-linear process of discovery or revelation. And so this is going to be one of these cycles where you're going to want to let yourself play a little bit more with the mystery. Play a little bit more with the signs and the symbols that feel synchronistic. If you get that deja vu, and ask, what was I just doing? What was I just thinking about? What conversation did I just have last? Or what conversation am I going into? The more we can pay attention to where these seemingly random coincidences or messages tend to pop up, the more we're going to be able to gather and put into our process of discovery or disclosure. And this is really important because remember that this new moon marks the point right before Mercury goes into its second draft of those grand water trines. So if you catch yourself feeling a random impulse to want to open an old book, or maybe to listen to an old song, to turn the Spotify or Apple Music shuffle on and to listen for the lyrics of the songs that come on. It's not so much seeking out the disclosure or seeking out the synchronicity and the symbolic messages. It's more about just living in the flow and living in the space of curiosity and listening. And you'll know because the message will be received, it'll hit like there's a deeper resonance, like a note that drops into the core of your being that says, wait, what did that just say? What did that song just say? What did that person just say? So listen to the conversations behind the conversations. Listen to the messages behind the timing of the synchronicity or the deja vus. And make sure to take notes. Make sure to have your journal ready so that you can open into this process of discovery and you can make the most of unraveling and retrieving what it is that you need so that you can go into the rest of these grand water trines and be the most open, be the most receptive and available to receive the magic that's trying to unfold. If you haven't already, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn your notifications on. That way you'll never miss a new episode when it's released. I want to return real quick to the point about this being a Mercury retrograde Cazimi at the point of this new moon. So if we were talking about a Mercury retrograde Cazimi on its own, we would talk about how this would mark that halfway point of the current Mercury retrograde cycle. We would talk about how this would be that sort of turning point of clarity. There's a certain illumination that happens at this point in Mercury retrograde where it can feel like everything that's been stirred up into a state of confusion or fog. Some of the things that are coming up for review, a little bit deeper research. In that first part of the Mercury retrograde, it kind of feels like, what the fuck is going on? Right? But when it hits this point of the retrograde, when Mercury comes into the conjunction with the sun, it's like we get this sudden candle that lights and glows up the dark of the unknown, of the confusion of that retrograde. We suddenly have a sense of direction and a sense of deeper clarity. What is the focus of this Mercury retrograde? What is the thing that I'm being pointed to unravel or to research and investigate a little bit further? So this is that point, and it's happening at the seeding of this new moon cycle. What else is happening around this retrograde is also Mercury in Scorpio activating that Uranus-Neptune sextile. This feels like Mercury is getting some sort of aha moment, a moment of the secret synapses, of things coming together, of an understanding that suddenly pieces and threads together past memories, current sense of self-limitation or limiting beliefs. It's as if everything starts to come into a picture and no longer separating itself as past, present, future. We can see this interconnection. We can see how it's all playing out. And it's almost as if the Scorpio new moon is lighting a candle in the middle of the dark and it's saying, this is the limiting story. This is the internal shadow work. This is the part of you that's asking for a deeper retrieval and integration, so that you can come into these grand water trines more holistic and available to receive what the magic is that they want to bring. If you remember, we talked in last week's episode about the sun grand water trines and this theme of coherence. The sun has to do with our sense of self. It is the main character energy. It has to do with the overall plot line of our purpose, of our life's direction or our life's work. And so if the sun brought a sense of coherence, maybe there was this igniting a sense of ambition and focus and vision, and we were ready to go. Maybe the Scorpio new moon with this Mercury Cazimi, maybe it's showing us, it's shining a light on the shadows that are secretly sabotaging or causing a sense of discord or disconnection, almost like that coherence. What is it that's still contradicting inside of ourselves from what it is that our conscious self is so clear that we want? It's our aim, it's our goal, it's our purpose. Everything in us consciously knows and is ready. But this Mercury Cazimi on the Scorpio new moon, it's showing what part of us still needs to be addressed and integrated in order for that full coherence. in order for a removal or a disarming of those internal conflicts. Again, it's about this integration work that's coming up during the Scorpio New Moon. And if you're somebody who could use some support on either starting or really going deeply into this shadow work process, I encourage you to check my one-on-one consultation links below. I infuse all of my astrology consultations with my coaching work, and a lot of that has to do with identifying where there might be inner conflict, both within the chart and the transits, within ourselves, our conscious, clear goals, and the part of us that's conflicting, resisting, or somehow maybe even sabotaging. Whether it's a timing thing with the transits or it's an internal block, it's a shadow, story, or a wound. What's beautiful is that the chart and also the conversation within that consultation container is so revealing and helpful to guide us through that, to get you into a place of clarity, cohesion, and integration, so that all parts of you can be on board for going in the direction that your conscious self is so ready for. So again, linked below, check it out, and let me know if you have any questions about any of that work that I do in those coaching containers or in the one-on-one astrology consultations. Okay, let's jump forward. So on Thursday, November 20th, this is when Mercury is going to make that exact conjunction to the sun, that inferior Cazimi, and Mercury after this point will be reborn, rising as the morning star. That's happening early in the morning at 1:23 a.m. Pacific time. And then after the Mercury Cazimi on Thursday, Uranus is going to make the exact sextile to Neptune and Pisces. Remember, this is a super rare aspect. These outer planets, they transit very rarely because they move so slowly. Did you know that Uranus and Neptune only make a conjunction around once every 170 years? The last time that they came together in a conjunction and started a new cycle together was in 1993. So this is still a fairly new phase of that cycle. This is actually only their first opening sextile. This is like a crescent moon phase in astrology. So this is just starting to bring light into what this cycle is all about. This is a very magical, a very rare transit. So we want to make sure to be tapped in and tuned in to make the most of the synchronicity and the support that Uranus and Neptune want to bring us. This is the moment where even if you're not woo, how can you open more to the mystery? If there is an invisible hand that's trying to reach and help you, the way that you make yourself available to that is by getting into a state of receptivity. This means getting into a state of safety, of surrender, tapping into the playful, joyful, curious state of inspiration and fun. So if you want to make the most of Uranus Neptune, you've got to get out of your way. You've got to stop trying to make too much happen and actually have more fun, more time for creativity and play and curiosity. And then just one more note about this Uranus-Neptune sextile is that this sextile is actually a series of sextiles because these planets move so slow with their retrogrades and direct paths. The first one happened back on August 28th, and the rest of these sextiles are going to be playing out from now through June of 2027. So this is a 2-year transit, a field of energy that the outer planets are having. And this is the only one that's happening between an Earth and a water sign. The rest are going to be happening when Uranus is in Gemini, an air sign, and Neptune is in Aries, a fire sign. So this is the yin of the yang in these sextiles. This is a much more receptive, intuitive, and feeling style of sextile, of relationship or conversation between Uranus and Neptune, which just further emphasizes and amplifies that the way to make the most of it, the way to really tap into the magic of this mystery is by slowing down, is by getting more into the body and the present moment. So make sure during the Scorpio New Moon week and the rest of this Scorpio cycle that you are doing what you can to make yourself an available, receptive vessel to receive, whether it's a helpful and healing message or maybe it's a secret doorway. The mystery is here to help you. Lean back, settle in, ground, and make yourself present. Then on Friday, November 21st, the moon is still in Sagittarius and the sun is going to reactivate the Neptune-Uranus sextile, making that opposition to Uranus and Taurus and the trine to Neptune and Pisces. This rounds out and finalizes the sun's Grandwater trine and kite formation If you want to know more about the specifics of those sun transits, go back to last week's episode when I covered all the details of the sun's transits to those planets and those aspects. But remember, in this kite, the release point, the tension point, is the point that actually activates the rest of the astrology's potential. And that point is the opposition to Uranus and Taurus. So this Friday, it might feel like a breakthrough moment. It might feel like something's breaking down in order for a breakthrough to happen. Come back to that idea of coherence. Come back to where there's some sort of contradiction. There's some sort of trying to force a circle in a square box. And Friday is saying it's time to just let yourself be a circle. Let go of all the squares. And having that natural coherence, letting go of the contradiction or the inner conflicts, and being more authentic, being more real with yourself, that's actually going to open you and activate the potential for the grandwater trines and all the magic that's still in the making. We still have Venus that's going to go through and Mercury's second and third draft. So Friday, what contradiction are you ready to let go of? Where are you ready to give yourself permission to come back into greater coherence, into greater authenticity? Maybe you're letting something break down because you're ready to finally just have this breakthrough. So Friday also might be this moment of the shadow integration work we talked about. Shadows are really these splits in self that happen from our early environmental conditioning and caretaking. And that doesn't mean that we're blaming our parents. It doesn't mean that we're blaming where we come from. But we're just acknowledging that there is a reality, a consequence of where we grew up and what imprinting that had on our understanding of the parts of ourselves that were acceptable, lovable, safe, and also what parts of ourselves and our early environment and our family relationships and dynamics were imprinted to believe it wasn't safe. It wasn't the part of us that was going to get the validation that we needed to feel like we were worthy back when we were little kids. The contradiction of good versus bad, worthy versus unworthy. If you were doing the shadow work, starting with that Scorpio New Moon, maybe by Friday, you finally have this kind of click into place, this reclamation of integration of a more holistic relationship to the parts of yourself. Personally, this is something I've experienced many, many times doing this work over so many years. But every single time, it's this moment of recognizing that I had been denying myself permission to own a part of myself because I was conditioned to believe that that part of me was not worthy or maybe even was bad. And so that could be so many different things. But an example for me, messaging that I received early on is that being angry or having a clear connection and expression of my anger as a woman, that was not good. That was not something that if I identified with that, if that was part of my personality and identity and what I was known for, there was a risk that I wasn't going to belong. There was a risk that I wouldn't get my needs met. There was a risk that I was going to be exiled or cut off from love, from connection. And so fast forward to when I'm an adult and I'm doing this shadow work and I'm recognizing that's just a misunderstanding. That's a misunderstanding that I bought into. I forgive myself. I forgive my caregivers. I forgive anything from my past that contributed to this misunderstanding, because the truth is that having a clear connection to my anger actually increases my safety in relationships. It actually amplifies the possibility for more authentic connection and belonging. The more that I own and express my anger clearly, the more that my relationships can be healthy, can be honest, can be clear. So maybe for you on Friday, there's this moment, this healing integration, this shadow part of self that has a breakthrough, a liberation, and a coming back into more coherence, a healing awareness, a healing reframe. So pay attention as the week unfolds. And if Friday comes around and you feel this impulse, you feel this urge to want to act in a way that you haven't before, you want to break free from an old story, narrative, or just innocent misunderstanding, this is the moment to do it. That's our release point of this kite. And after the sun makes that trine to Neptune and Pisces, it's going to enter into Sagittarius. And that takes us into Saturday, November 22nd, when we have the sun in Sagittarius, the moon in Capricorn, and Mercury retrograde making its second draft grandwater trine with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. The way that I'm thinking about draft 2 of Mercury's grandwater trine, if Mercury's first draft of the grandwater trines was the proposal, it was the initial negotiation, it was the idea put out and spoken out loud, the first question that we posed maybe, right? But now Mercury's coming back. And to me, this feels especially tied into the themes of the Scorpio New Moon that we've been talking about with the shadow work and the process of discovery. I'm thinking of this as more of an opportunity to clear. So we're doing an editing draft of Mercury's grand water trine. And one of the tools that I use with myself and with clients is this 3-part phrase. It says, delete, destory, uncreate. Anything feeding the misunderstanding that anger is bad, anything feeding a false belief that anger is not safe. And again, I'm just tying into the themes of the example, the shadow work that I gave for that Sun Uranus opposition. But it might be anything. You can think about what stories are being revealed, what limiting beliefs, what old narratives, what are the things that are asking for a reframe, are asking for a secret synapse, a new connection in order to move us forward to clear those internal blockages. So to clear the blocks, this is when we ask and we put Mercury's retrograde into motion with the grand water trines by saying, delete, destory, uncreate. Anything blank. So maybe write this down, pause this video so that you've got this. You can take it into your journal, into your morning practice to use and work with. Make it a daily ritual. This would be a great exercise to work with for the remainder of this Mercury retrograde until Mercury stations direct on November 29th, so that when Mercury stations direct and it turns forward to come into that final draft of the grand water trine, this time you've got the clearing done. You've got the question, you've got the manifestation, you've got the desires ready to write, and all of the baggage is clear, and you're ready to go bigger and to write it in bold. And if you're somebody who doesn't know exactly what that hidden limiting belief is, or the self-sabotaging inner conflict, the separation, the parts, the shadows, this is also a great opportunity with Mercury's retrograde in those trines to pose a question, to ask a question to open into a deeper process of discovery. And maybe it's these questions. We start to open the state of curiosity, asking ourselves, what would it be like if I felt safe to feel my anger? Or any other intuitive idea that you have to pose a question or to open the mind to create and stimulate these new neural networks to form, these new secret synapses. I'm curious. I want to hear if you have any ideas, if there's anything that's resonating or you want to take into this draft 2 of the Mercury retrograde grand water trines, please comment below, share your resources, your ideas, or maybe even your questions in the comments. And remember that all of this information, all of this revealing, the deleting, the destoring, the uncreating, or the new question creating that Mercury's doing in draft 2, Venus gets to benefit from, because on Monday, November 24th, Venus and Scorpio meets up with a conjunction, a passing of those secret notes in the hallway of Mercury's retrograde back. And Mercury is slipping the secret to Venus before Venus enters into the grand water trines. What is this secret message that Mercury has for Venus that's going to help Venus enter into the grand water trines with a little bit more clarity? Maybe there's somebody from the past that's coming back to give Venus a helpful reframe. Maybe there is a healing resolution or repair in matters of the heart that happens just in time for Venus to open into those grand water trines, to enter into that conversation and dialogue with possibility, potential, and magic, with the flowing new connections that are coming in the water trines, because she's got a clear heart, because she's cleared some sort of underlying misunderstanding, some sort of barriers that's kept her heart maybe a little bit guarded. It feels like Venus is getting this opportunity to reframe a past hurt, or maybe to circle back to an old conversation or an old memory in order to create a new sense of understanding and internal resolution. Something that's going to help Venus to open into these grand water trines in a more receptive, available state. So on Monday, pay attention. What message is Mercury trying to deliver to your heart? Or how is Mercury helping you to create a sense of repair and resolution if there's been an open-ended misunderstanding in your relationships? And how can you imagine the opportunity for reframing, for revisioning your sense of certainty previously? How can you imagine that serving as a sort of secret alliance that's going to inform and improve your heart's capacity to receive the potential, the possibility for when Venus and Scorpio starts those grand water trines? And that's how we're going to end this week and end this episode. We'll get into more of the details of the Venus themes of the grand water trines in next week's episode, as well as Mercury's station direct just in time for the Gemini full moon. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn those notifications on. Also, if you have any friends, family, anyone you think that might benefit from the conversation on today's episode, please feel free to share this video. It supports me and the channel so much, and it's always good to ripple out the effect of support for the rest of the people, the friends in our lives, our communities. I'm also so stoked to announce that the registration is open for our 2026 year ahead forecast. We're going to be doing a live forecast for the astrology of 2026. We've titled it Faultlines and New Frontiers, and it's going to be all three astrologers, myself, Whitney Kranz, and Alexandra Blair. So if you're somebody who's interested and curious to know more about the dramatic astrology coming in 2026, not just about the transits, but also possibly what to do about it, then you're definitely going to want to check out our live event. Again, registration is open. It's all linked below, and it can be found on my website with more information. And you can always reach out, email with any questions that you might have about that event or any of my offerings below. I'm wishing everybody so much magic and the mystery of this Scorpio new moon. And may we all experience this healing alchemy and the darkness and the mystery as a new sense of magic and inspiration for the potential and the possibility of what gets to create next. Thank you so much. I am Sarah Posh, astrologer and coach, and I will see everybody here next week on Cozy with the Cosmos.